The reading today is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13. You'll probably recognize this. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, "Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from?" He answered, "An enemy has done this." The slaves said to him, "Then do you want us to go and gather them?" But he replied, "No, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn." Then he left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples approached him, saying, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field." And he answered them, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears listen." So today we're continuing in this section of Matthew where Jesus is speaking to the crowds in a series of parables. And last week, Brian taught on a different parable. He led us through the parable of the sower. And in that parable, a sower goes out to sow his seed, and the seed falls on different types of soil. So there's rocky soil, there's a footpath that it falls on, there's soil that's full of thorns, and then there's the good soil. And Brian encouraged us to think about the soil of our lives and what we can do to cultivate good soil in our lives and actually cultivate the soil in other people's lives as well. So how can we be prepared to receive the word that Jesus is sowing in our lives? And how can we be prepared to be fruitful with that seed? So today's parable comes directly after that one, and it's often called the parable of the weeds, or the weeds among the wheat. And it's one of only 3 parables where Jesus actually gives an explanation afterwards to his disciples, which seems to imply that it is an important one. Not that they're all important, they are. But this one, for whatever reason, includes an explanation. And it's a little bit ironic that this one comes with an explanation, because the explanation seems to be a little bit at odds with the parable itself. Or at least they seem to have slightly different emphases. So in the parable, a man sows his field with good seed, with grain. And at night the enemy comes and sows weeds among the wheat. And when the plants come up, the servants obviously notice all of these weeds mixed in. And they ask the landowner, "What's the problem here? Did you sow bad seed in your own field?" The landowner says, "No, I sowed good seed. But for whatever reason, an enemy has come and has thrown weeds in to the other seed." So the servants then try to help solve the problem. So they say, "Well, do you want us to go in and weed the field? Do you want us to uproot all the weeds?" Landowner says, no, I don't want you to do that. Because if you try to uproot all the weeds, you're going to end up damaging the wheat. And so I want you to let them all grow together. And at the harvest, the reapers are going to collect the weeds, which will be burned, and the wheat is going to go into the barn. So here, to me, it seems like the emphasis in the parable is on the landowner's instruction to the servants. He wants them to let the weeds grow. That was their question, right? What should we do? How do we fix this problem? So later, Jesus goes into the house and he explains the parable to his disciples. So the Son of Man is the one who sows the good seed. The field that he sows it in is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, and the weeds are the children of the evil one, and the bad sower is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and at that time the Son of Man will send his angels to collect all causes of evil and all evildoers, and they will be thrown into the fire with weeping and gnashing of teeth, and the righteous will be saved. Now, to my ear, this explanation that Jesus gives seems to shift the emphasis to the punishment of the evil ones. That's where all the juicy extra details are. The weeping, the gnashing of teeth. And interestingly, in the explanation, Jesus doesn't even address the instructions to the servants to let the weeds grow. So the parable and the explanation feel a little bit at odds. Now, even with Jesus's explanation, this parable has been interpreted in many, many different ways. And when we are dealing with parables, the first question really is, well, why did Jesus tell this in the first place? Or what situation is he addressing? Or what question is he trying to answer? So one of the more popular interpretations of this parable is that Jesus is talking about the mixed character of the church, or the unsettling fact that even among his own followers, evil and sin are still present and are still very active. But that doesn't really line up with Jesus' explanation, because he says pretty clearly, no, the field is the world. The field is everything. It's not just the church that I'm talking about. And actually, I think Jesus is addressing a question and a situation that many of us probably struggle with pretty regularly, I would think. So Jesus's parables are all about the kingdom of God. So in his preaching, he proclaims over and over again, the kingdom of God is at hand. The kingdom of God has come near. It is here. So let's imagine that we were one of the lucky few to be able to meet Jesus in the flesh, in person. We got to hear him preach in ancient Palestine. So we are there, and he says, the kingdom of God is here. It is at hand. And you probably feel some excitement. You feel a sense of hope and probably a sense of relief. Finally, God's promises are being fulfilled. But then you walk home and you look around, and on your way back home, what do you see? The same things that you saw on the way there. Doesn't look all that different to you. Maybe you don't see much of a difference at all. And let's say if this is actually God's kingdom that is coming into the world, why are Roman soldiers occupying it? And in all of the prophecies about this new kingdom of God, it is very clear that there is no place in it for evil or sin. Even John the Baptist, the one who prepared the way for Jesus, even he was having second thoughts. He sends his followers to Jesus and says, are you the one who is to come? Is it really you? And it's a fair question because Jesus was not living up to the expectations of what the kingdom of God was going to look like. So it seems like the question Jesus is addressing in this parable is, if the kingdom of God is here, why does it look like this? And again, I think most of us can relate. And if I'm speaking honestly, I think this is one of the more powerful arguments for at least agnosticism, maybe not atheism, but I can see where the doubt arises. If there is an all-powerful, loving God, and if Jesus was God and came here to usher in the kingdom of God, how do you explain all the evil that's surrounding us? And then, how do you have the gall to follow Jesus's lead and proclaim in the world, the kingdom is at hand? Right? There is no getting around this fundamental tension. And in a commentary I read this week, the author writes, the kingdom is not visibly overwhelming, which I thought was a funny understatement. In the parable, Jesus is acknowledging this very fact. And he offers some pretty striking instructions. So he says, do not try to eradicate or kill the weeds in an attempt to create your own pure kingdom. Do not try to manufacture or control the kingdom of God by relying on your own power and your own judgment, by assuming the position of the judge. Right? We have seen that happen many, many times throughout history. It's why the idea of utopias can be so dangerous. Because people then try to make utopias, which inevitably leads to eradicating the weeds, or who we think the weeds are. So Jesus says, don't do this. It does damage. It's not your job. It is, this parable is really difficult because of what we probably think of as the harshness of that judgment, right? The gnashing of teeth, throwing in the fire. I honestly don't know how to deal with that. I think it's hard for us here, mostly as pretty privileged Americans, to appreciate the Israelites' desire and longing for God's judgment. They lived under a brutal occupying force. So to them, God's judgment meant liberation, right? God's judgment meant exodus from Egypt. So when Jesus explains the harvest in the final judgment, it probably sounded different to them than it sounds to us. Maybe it sounded more hopeful. I'm not saying that Jesus' teaching about the judgment or the harvest would not have scared them or made them rethink their lives or how they live their lives. I'm pretty sure that that was part of Jesus' intention. But I expect that the harder your life is, the more hopeful God's judgment probably sounds to you. So the emphasis on judgment is complicated. It is both scary and at the same time a source of hope. Jesus is saying essentially, trust me, I will make things right. I will eradicate evil. There is a cosmic judge. There is. And you are not it. So I guess, thinking back 2,000 years ago, we're still in the growing season. The harvest has not come. Or there have been many growing seasons, generations of crops keep coming and going and turning over. And I think sometimes it's easy to ask, does the world look any different in any meaningful way since Jesus's birth, death, and resurrection? Are people any different than we used to be before God came to earth? That's an impossible question to answer. And I almost think it's beside the point. In another place, Jesus says, The kingdom of God is not coming with things that can be observed. Nor will they say, look, here it is, or there it is. For in fact, the kingdom of God is among you. And I think actually we can point to the kingdom of God, but it doesn't grow or exist according to our expectations. So it's not as spectacular as the world might want or as we might want. But also, why would it be? God came to earth as a normal child, born to normal parents, walked among normal people, and went mostly unobserved by people. And I think that should tell us something about the kingdom of God. So I guess all I can say is let us continue to be formed into kingdom of God people in our own humble but real ways, and to put our hope in the cosmic judge who will set all things right, because it is faith in him that gives us the power to live in a kingdom that is somehow here right now.